All right, hello everyone. I am Jennifer Kupaszewski with the Kyle and Kupaszewski Law Firm. We are an elder law firm here in Scottsdale, Arizona, practicing in the area of special needs trusts, estate planning, guardianships, conservatorships, um, all things elder law. And I do all of the litigation, so I'm the loudmouth. I'm the one who fights over wills and trusts and all of that. Fortunately, you're not here to listen to me today, which is great. We have Karen Barr here with us, and she is the publisher and founder of Raising Arizona Kids magazine. And in full disclosure, I raised my kids here in Arizona. I'm actually an Arizona native, and I grew up with my kids reading her magazine every single month. I looked forward to it. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? She's going to tell me what to do, what all the fun things are going to be, and the resources. And I just loved it. And even to this day, Karen, I don't know if I've ever told you this, even to this day, if I go into like the dentist or something that's sitting there, I still pick it up and read it. And I don't, my kids are in their, they're all grown and out of college, but it's just really well written and it's a great magazine. So we have Karen here, and we're going to learn all about how she started it, who she is, and I'm just really excited. I got to know Karen later in life when we are both now on the board of Raising Special Kids, and we've been doing that for a few years now.
Yep.
And that's been super, super fun, and that's how I got to know Karen, and now you're going to get to know more of what I know. So I know you have new additions to your family. And I definitely want to hear about that. I know you're sitting not in Arizona because that is a lovely, lovely green space behind you.
Yeah,
So tell me what's going on with the family.
sure. So I'm actually sitting on the back patio of my son and daughter-in-law's home. And we drove up here yesterday. They live in Berkeley, California. And we drove up here yesterday because for the next 2 months, we get to be supplemental childcare for our baby granddaughter, Addie. So we're really excited about that. And just actually got to spend a few minutes with her before we got started. The first time I've seen her since she was born in March. We were here in March when she was born, but we were not allowed into the hospital, of course, because the pandemic was
Right.
already becoming an issue at that point. And so my husband and I took on the role of just fetching takeout for our son as he was waiting for his laboring wife, and then fetching food for the new mom and daddy, and just sort of waiting outside the hospital thinking they're in there, they're in there. And then, of course, the day that after she was born, Berkeley shut down, and Kathy Hoffman, our superintendent of public instruction, and Governor Doug Ducey announced on the 16th that we were shutting schools down in Arizona.
Yeah.
So that was happening, and Berkeley was shutting down. And so we stayed long enough for them to bring the baby home from the hospital. And we were all masked up and everything, of course, and the hospital's just a few blocks away. So we walked home with the baby.
Aw.
They brought her home in the stroller, and we got to hold her for just a teeny little bit, and then we had to catch a plane home. So
Aw.
I've been waiting 24 weeks to get my hands on that little nugget, and it just feels really good to be able to be in her space now.
Oh, that's so exciting. Well, you and I have talked that we're doing the same thing going, and we have our kids, they're working from home and they've got these little ones, and it's just hard. And so I'm excited to go Saturday to do exactly the same thing and help out, be some childcare
Yeah.
for our almost 2-year-old grandchild. I know you've had some other big events though,
Yeah,
too.
I know. I mean, in this time when we're none of us supposed to be traveling much, we also recently returned from a couple of days in Chicago where our younger son, David, finally got married in a very social distance appropriate backyard wedding. They had a big wedding planned in the end of May, and they had to cancel that, of course. And then they rescheduled for August 29th, and then had to cancel that.
Yeah.
So they just decided, they had just bought a house, and they just decided, we want to make this legal. We want to be married, and we'll deal with, maybe we'll have a big party in a year or so when things are better. But so that it's just been a really happy, happy time for us. It's so strange. A lot of people are suffering right now and feeling so much loss. And I feel like my heart is full, and there's just so many good things happening in our lives right now. So very grateful for that.
Yeah, that's really, really good to hear. And figuring out how to make the whole family thing work in the pandemic, right?
Exactly.
It's such a challenge. Well, that congratulations for one. Those both are very exciting. Um, I had one of those years where we had a baby and a wedding, and it's a good year. It's a good year. So I do want to talk about the magazine, but I want to start with because I know you've been a writer for a long time. It's not just the magazine. I mean, you're trained, and so I want to hear how you got started as a writer and how all that happened
Sure. So if you want to go all the way back, I remember
all
being
the
a
way.
second grader who loved reading and writing. And when my family moved, I wrote a little book for my favorite teacher, Mrs. Quessenberry, about the clown who had to relearn how to smile. So anyway, I've always liked putting together articles, publications, little just I remember I started a novel when I was in fifth grade about a girl who time traveled back to the Revolutionary War. It's just been something I've always played with. In high school, though, is when I really started thinking of it as a career. And that's, of course, when I got involved in the student newspaper. I was actually the sports editor at my high school newspaper, which was unheard of back in those days. There was a big headline that said, "The sports editor is a girl. Oh my God." And the funny
Before
part
it was
about it,
cool, right?
yeah, the funny part about it was I didn't even know squat about sports, but I had two brothers that were running cross country, and nobody ever writes about cross country. So I thought I'm going to be the sports editor so I can write about my brothers. And
Oh
so,
my gosh, that's so
and so
great.
that's what I did. But what it did was it led me into when I was at the University of Arizona, I worked on the Wildcat staff, and then I transferred very bizarrely my senior year of college to the University of Guam, which was quite an unusual move and sparked a lot of
Yeah.
questions from my family, of course. But at that university, they didn't know they no longer had a newspaper, so I decided they needed one, and I started one, and I networked with the local Gannett newspaper, the Pacific Daily News, to get typewriters donated and reams of that paper, that used to go forever.
I, I learned on a typewriter when, yes, I remember.
Yeah. So then, thankfully, because I had made those connections, I met some of the editors there. They gave me some freelance assignments, and that pretty much launched my career because I was able to do some writing and reporting in Micronesia. And working for a small newspaper is great training for anything because you get everything thrown at you and you just go with it. So it was a great training ground, and I think that I would have loved staying in the Pacific, but Guam is very small, and my mom was very far away, and I love my
Yeah,
mom and I love being with
right.
my mom. And we didn't have internet, of course, or any way to
Hmm.
communicate easily. So I just got homesick and finally came home. And then I got a job at the Arizona Republic, where I met my husband, Dan, who is was at that time also a reporter. My
Oh, I
job
didn't
was
know
night
that.
rewrite. Yeah. Oh, I guess I haven't told you. Yeah. So
I didn't
my
know
job,
that. Okay.
yeah, he was covering cops and courts, and he was working night shift. And I was working the night shift because I was the night rewrite editor. And we also
Oh,
coincidentally happened to live in the same apartment complex. That was completely random.
wow.
So we had our days off were the same, our schedule was the same, and we lived in the same apartment complex. So we started just running into each other in the laundry room and the swimming pool and places like that.
Oh my gosh.
Started hanging out, going for bike rides, going for hikes, things like that. And one thing led to another. And a year later, we were married. So,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it was
and
meant to be.
yeah.
And then you
And
had two kids.
yep.
Yeah.
Dan left the newspaper to go to law school. So he's a
Hmm.
practicing attorney, has been for 35 years. And while he was in school, the other Cleveland newspaper, the Cleveland Press at the time, had folded. And so everyone was looking for journalism jobs. And I didn't know a thing about Cleveland. So I wasn't able to find a job. So I decided to go back to school also. And I got an MBA while he was finishing his JD. And I got pregnant the last year of business school. Gave my presentation to General Motors with my big pregnant belly. and and then it was like, okay, we're done. We got to get Karen to Arizona because that's or Dan was coming back to work, and I only had a
Okay.
few weeks to get settled before our son Andy was born. So yeah, so
Wow.
he was born in 85, then we had another son in 87. And I was a stay-at-home mom for a while.
Yeah.
And I
And
like,
then stay-at-home mom you are decides to start a magazine.
yeah, go figure. I know,
Yeah,
sort of like,
right.
journalism, MBA, mom, what can you do with that stuff?
Right, right.
Kind of made sense. And
How did you end up starting this magazine? I
yeah,
mean,
so I was so helped by the North Central Parenting Group, which I joined with my newborn.
mm,
And just sort of, it was like eye-opening. Oh my gosh, I mean, you can learn how to be a good parent. This was just
right.
unheard of to me. I thought that people just parented kind of by instinct and how they were parented themselves. And I just loved everything I was hearing back then. It was just when they were starting to know so much about brain science and infant
Hmm.
development and understanding a child's developmental stages so that you could kind of
Yeah.
work with it instead of being frustrated with it. I thought it
Frustrated.
was
Yeah.
amazing. And I
Yeah.
kept thinking, wow, I mean, there are 40 of us in this program. More people need this information. And so we had a newsletter for the little group, and I worked on the newsletter for a while, and I recruited some people to help me, and we just got such positive reception that a few of us started talking about, wow, what if we created a newsletter that went beyond just the scope of our little group here. And so that was what started it. And then I discovered that, hey, guess what? Other people around the country are already doing this in the format of a magazine or a newspaper.
Oh,
And
okay.
once I saw a few of those, I thought, well, if I can start a newspaper in Guam, I can probably figure out how to do it in Arizona.
Right.
So that's what we did. I mean, I like to tell the story about how I had no idea what I was doing, but every time I'd come up with an idea, I'd stick it in a manila folder. And of course, the name Raising Arizona Kids, a lot of people ask me, is it the same as the movie?
Oh, I
And
remember
the
that
movie,
movie.
remember that? And the
Yeah.
movie Raising Arizona, they were casting for that when my son Andy was born, and they were looking for little blonde, babies that were the same age he was. My mother-in-law had tried to get me to take Andy in for an audition, which I didn't do, but I remember just sort of sticking in my brain like, wow, I really like that name, Raising
Hmm.
Arizona. And
Yeah.
so when I started thinking about doing a magazine or a newspaper, that's when I started my file folder called Raising Arizona Kids. And that's kind of what it
Wow.
became.
Yeah. So, fun fact, when the movie came out, I was working at the Cine Capri. Do you remember the old big Cine
Yes,
Capri?
I do.
Yes, I worked there all through high school, and it played there. So I've seen it
Wow.
so many times.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's still a great name. I'm now seeing organizations like there's one in Colorado that's called Raising Colorado. So I think that, people
It
are
caught
getting,
on.
yeah, it's getting catching on. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, it really just started very, very slowly and just gradually. And I think that the reason we launched in March of 1990 was because in April of 90, there was a big conference starting to happen for early childhood educators. Actually, it may have
Okay.
been the end of March, because we were scrambling to get the magazine pulled together, and we printed the first one at one of those Sir Speedy print shops, just
Oh
like an
yeah.
Alpha Graphics type print shop. I mean, only from 30 years ago. And
Right.
they were running late getting them stapled. So one of my friends that helped me start the magazine, Teresa, picked me up one morning, and we went down there and stapled magazines together ourselves just to get them done in time for this conference. And then the first batch that we had to mail, I had 5,000 magazines sitting in my living room, and I was, putting them in bundles and trying to figure out the whole zip code sorting and all that stuff. My husband came home from work that night, and I made him help me, and he said, I don't care what it costs. We are not doing this again the next month. We have to find somebody who can do this for you.
Right, right.
So,
Because you were all, I mean, you didn't start with like money, and you're
not
just
at
us,
all.
you and some other parents, right?
Yeah, me and some other parents, and fortunately one of those parents was just a gifted salesperson, and I could not have done this without her. And she was very pivotal to getting the business side of it started for me. And so that was a really good thing. It's like everybody I needed was just sort of there when I needed them.
Yeah, yeah. And I know some of the old photos, some of the media show you in what looks like a little kid's room.
Yeah, we started in my okay, so we had a tiny little 3-bedroom house. Each of the boys had their own rooms, and when I decided to start the magazine, I started putting all my stuff in our youngest son's bedroom, and finally just booted him out and put him in a room with his brother, and they loved it. They had a set of trundle beds and they were in there playing all the time. It worked out great. And I just took over the nursery and put up all my old computer that was so slow. You'd like press something and wait and wait and wait.
I remember that
And
computer.
turn. Yeah.
I remember that,
And
yeah.
gosh, those first magazines too, Jennifer, we would do the layout on pages, where you're stripping the
Oh, right.
galleys and everything. I mean, oh my gosh, it's so different now. Um, but it was a
Yeah.
lot of fun. And yeah, so we had my son's train wallpaper all over our office, and my friends would come over, and most of them, all of them volunteered at the very beginning. And then of course, as money came in, we started paying the staff people. But it was really just a labor of love and a bunch of women I had met from the parenting group and also my son's preschool. And I just was so fortunate to have all those people that would help get this thing started. Some of whom
Right.
have come back and forth from the magazine. Some of them have been writing for us in recent years again. One of them is a grandmother now, and she and her daughter wrote a really sweet piece for Mother's
Oh,
Day because it was sort of like parenting then versus parenting now. And so,
yeah. You could
yeah.
do that. Magazine then, magazine now. You could.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that a lot had changed on some things. What makes me sad is that so many of the things we were concerned about then, like universal pre-K and some money for early childhood education and educators and
Mhm.
teachers and all of those things that we're still concerned about today, those were all true then. And it makes me sad that 30 years later, we haven't made more progress as a society on some of those things.
Right, right. But 30 years. Wow.
Yeah,
That's 30 years. When did the magazine have its 30-year birthday?
it was, oh gosh, right before the pandemic hit. So our
Right before
30th,
the pandemic.
yeah, our 30, I mean, this is what's so bizarre. The 30th anniversary issue had just come out the 1st of March. And by the middle of March, I had to make a decision not to print my April magazine because we
Yeah.
knew immediately that we would not have places to distribute it as the schools were shutting down, the museums were shutting down, doctors' offices were not allowing magazines in their waiting rooms. When you say you would
Mhm.
find it everywhere you would go, well, now when you go to the dentist or doctor's office, they don't have anything on the
Right.
tabletops. They're just
Right.
trying to get it.
Everything's, yeah,
Mhm.
Spartan. I am I am curious about how you got it everywhere, because I know when I was raising my kids, I felt like I knew I could count on it. Like I could go that I knew it would be there, everywhere that it was like in all the places. How especially before, I mean, this is 30 years ago, right? So how did you accomplish that?
Yeah, well, the fun part was we would take our kids and our magazines and go out to a lot of different events around town, and then make contacts by doing that. And we would always say, if, say, for example, a doctor was at our area and was talking with us, we'd say, hey, would you consider putting some of these in your waiting room? So a lot of it was just grassroots, connecting with people. We did originally buy some mailing lists just to get things started. And we continue to just build our database from that standpoint, just as we hear about new practices that open, new schools that open, those kinds of things. But in the beginning, a lot of it was just hand, can I give you a copy of my magazine?
That's
Have you
so
heard about Raising Arizona Kids?
right, right.
So, I
That's
mean,
a that
I would take them to my kids' little league games. I mean, we were all just had magazines in our cars all the time, and we would just pass them out very proudly wherever we went.
wow, wow. So I mean, that's a real grassroots labor of love.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
still is to a large degree, but
Yeah, right, right.
yeah.
Um, So you started talking about how things have changed in the pandemic, and so tell me, I mean, you had a lot going on in March. There you are, having the grandbaby, the world's shutting down, and you're
Yeah.
making big decisions about your business.
Yeah, it was, I mean, all of us have been through it to some degree or another. I mean, there were really tough decisions that had to be made very quickly. Deciding not to print our April magazine was, to me, a no-brainer, because I just knew that it wasn't going to get distributed the way it should have been, and I didn't feel that was fair to advertisers to go ahead and
Okay.
take those commitments and take their money and then struggle to get the magazines out where they needed to be. So we immediately, while I was still here in Berkeley, my daughter-in-law was in labor, and I was writing emails to all of our clients saying, look, it's okay, we get it, we're not gonna print April, we'll let you know, you can either change your ad to a digital buy, or you can just postpone it as long as you need to, but we're not going to ask you to pay for something that we don't feel we can produce for you the way we typically would.
Right.
So we took a couple of months to regroup like that. We immediately started doing a daily email newsletter that first month, because we just felt that everybody was like, whoa, what's going on here, and how do we navigate this, and what do I
Right.
need to know, and what's going on with school, and what's going on with camps, and everybody had so many questions. So we did a lot of just our own independent reporting, did a lot of curating from the news and so forth, to try to help provide those resources and stories for people. And for about 6 weeks, I think we did that 5 days a week newsletter. It was a
Wow.
lot. And I think then we started realizing, okay, now we're all settling in to
Mm-hmm.
our pandemic normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it was less about panic and more about developing routines and coping with all the changes. And so we've stepped it back. So we went from 5 days a week to 3 days a week to 2 days a week. And now we're back on our regular schedule for our
Okay.
newsletter, which is just weekly, on Wednesdays. And if we feel we need to jump it up, we will. But we really focused on our digital products, our website, our email newsletter, our social media, trying to get news out immediately, because of course a monthly magazine is monthly, and that's not when
Yeah.
everybody needs the information. So
Especially nowadays, right?
yeah, they
Because
need
I
it
know
right.
you do like this the summer camp issue and the education issue and the
Yes.
all of that, and that's all very timely focus. And by the way, all going down, right?
Yeah.
Schools close, and then
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Well, are we doing summer camp? What are we doing? I don't know. What are,
Oh, I know, Jennifer. Yeah, we did all this work to get the summer camp issue pulled together. Then we had to redo all that work, contact all those people. What are you doing now? This is when, too, we started introducing what we call our pandemic parenting poll.
Yeah,
Uh, and in the newsletter, we would periodically ask parents one of the biggest questions that we started with was, do you feel comfortable sending your kids to summer camp, whether it's a day camp or an overnight camp? And we had a tremendous interest in that and a tremendous response to that. And it broke down about in thirds. About a third of the
hmm
parents said, no way am I sending my kids, they're staying home. About a third said, heck yeah, they're, they're going to go. And then the rest just said, I am really undecided and I have no idea what to do.
yeah,
And what happened is we heard from a lot of the camps saying, what did the parents say? What did the parents
right,
say? And so as we shared those results, it was interesting because, as you know, a lot of them did a big pivot. Some went virtual, some didn't have camp at all this summer, and some were very carefully holding in-person camps. And
yeah,
everybody's had
yeah.
tough decisions to make.
Yes, those are tough things to do when everything's changing all of the time. But it seems like you're settling into a pretty good digital, like it's an all digital magazine now, right?
Yeah, right now it is. So we took April and May off and just focused on the newsletter. And then beginning in June, we started publishing just a digital magazine. We had always done a digital version of the magazine, but more as an archive and a record, uh,
Mm-hmm.
keep on our website. And now we're just getting a little bit more focused on delivery of that digital magazine. So
Right.
say, for
Yeah.
example, we used to distribute 35,000 print magazines. Well, now you have to think, okay, how does that translate in a digital world? And we weren't quite sure. So, you know, we have thankfully partnered with a third-party platform that allows us to do some very specific data targeting on email delivery. And so we are sending the digital magazine via email to 150,000 households every month, in addition to our own email list of people that that have been
Wow.
following us all along. So yeah, it's a different world, and of course it's a different way of reading, and
Hmm.
everybody has a personal preference. I mean, I think a lot of us really still love reading print and find it annoying to read digital, and yet we're getting trained to read digital anyway. So
Yeah.
continuing to tweak the model and figure out how to make it more user friendly. But I
Right.
think right now we've committed to doing it that way through the end of the year,
Okay.
and
Okay. Yeah.
then
Yeah.
we'll start printing after 2021 starts.
Well, I read the digital magazine, and still the stories are great. And again, the content for me as a parent raising kids in Arizona, love that it's just absolutely specific and local. Like
Yeah.
that to me was the most, because you get those national magazines, um, and it's like, okay, that's a great idea, but like you had mentioned, a campfire in the backyard. I'm like, it's July, it's 115 degrees. That's not going to work for me. It's like half the magazine didn't apply to living in a desert.
Right, exactly. That's always been really important to us because it isn't possible to be all things to all people. And we called the magazine Raising Arizona Kids for a reason, is
Mhm.
we're raising kids in this state of Arizona, which is a beautiful state and has a lot of advantages that a lot of places in the country don't have, but it also has the challenges, everything from scorpions that you have to be aware of to,
Right.
dehydration issues, which become huge for us, and water
Hmm.
safety awareness, which is huge with so many swimming pools in our community and so forth. So we try to, in everything we do, first of all, I'm really focused on using only local writers. It's important to me that the parents that write for us are living and working in Arizona. We try to quote local expertise whenever possible because we have just a vast array of incredible experts
Hmm.
everywhere from health and education to the law, like you all are doing. Those resources are right here. We don't need to go outside of
Right.
Arizona for that. And so we're just trying to, and then also specific resources and specific things for families to do. We're trying to keep that really local because we're a small local company and we want to support small local companies and big
Yeah.
ones too. So uh,
Yeah.
that's been the
So
focus.
basically, you were local before local was cool, right?
Yeah, I'd like to say we were ahead of our time. We were
You
working
were
at
ahead of your
home
time.
before working at home was cool. We were,
There you go. Right, right. Doing it without internet,
right, doing it without internet.
which is way, way harder.
Yeah, my
Um,
children always say they learned to read because they were in the back of the seat, the back seat of the car with nothing to do, and so I'd throw comic books at them, and they read comic books while we were driving around, delivering magazines at the hospitals, delivering magazines all over the valley. We
yeah,
had this route we used to do. It took us 3 or 4 days just to get them all out. It was crazy.
that is just an absolutely amazing. Well, it's an amazing accomplishment, and now a lot of people are thinking of starting their own businesses. Now they're in their homes. I mean, what would you tell them? Because you just are such a body of knowledge, having all of that time, right? Having done this
Yeah.
for so long.
I mean, and my son is an entrepreneur now too, so we
Oh,
compare
wow.
notes a lot, but I really think that it just so much depends on how much you want it and just keeping at it, and that when you get discouraged, just getting away from it for a minute or day and,
Yeah.
and getting back to it, and not letting it tear you down. But I mean, I've learned so many lessons the hard way. I've done every wrong thing probably you can do in running a business. I've had a
Oh,
lot of bad,
same.
well, that's how you learn, right?
Yeah.
We've had a lot of hurdles. The pandemic, of course, we had a period of 5 years where our office kept flooding and we had to move out, move in, move out, move in.
My gosh.
Of course, we've been through 2 recessions and now heading, through another one. So it's been a lot of challenges. I'm fortunate in that my husband has a steady position at his law firm, and I never had to worry that my children would go unfed or my roof would disappear over my house. So I do not in any way take that for granted. But it also, as an entrepreneur, it's just a question of, can you stick with it? Do you love what you do? Do you feel passionate about what you do? Does it matter to you? If it does, then when you get knocked down, you're going to get right back up and keep moving forward. And I see my son doing that with his own business too, and the ups and the downs that he's had. But one of the little pieces of specific advice I always give people is, please do not seek publicity before you're ready to handle it. Because that was one of the things that got me early on. It was the newspapers in Arizona were writing stories about this little magazine. These mommies are running out of their houses,
Yeah.
like it was this quaint story. And I had one answering machine and
Hmm.
one phone line, and we had, I think, I don't even know how many calls, because the thing stopped taking messages. And I had a meeting outside of the office or out of my home office that day, so nobody was there to answer the phone. So here's this newspaper coverage, we have no one there to answer the phone, we have no answering machine capability after about 20 phone calls. So it's really a lost opportunity. And so I always tell people, don't start seeking that attention until you've got the capacity to follow up when people respond.
Yeah, you hear that sometimes, like, Oprah will do that, these products, and she'll, show some product and it's local and whatever.
Mm.
And yeah, they don't have the capacity to handle the Oprah audience.
Not at all. Oh, not at all. No. And see,
Yeah,
in the social media world, that can happen easily now. You just never
yeah,
know when something could take off virally, and then all of a sudden you're overwhelmed.
yeah,
So.
yeah, no, very true. Very true. So what do you see in the future of the magazine?
Well, I mean, mostly just keeping our noses above water for the next few months, and then hopefully getting back to print, and probably a limited capacity moving forward. I think we'll stick to just the mail delivery, because we are one of the few magazines around the country that has a subscriber base and a mailing
Hmm.
list that we mail to. And I think that we will continue to do that. But the digital model, I think, is really the future. And I'm very interested in learning more about and exploring some new platforms that are available to increase the readability of a digital publication. So I've been looking at some of those, just doing a lot of research. Of course, the future has to involve some changes with staffing. We've had some staff we've lost this last few months because we had to kind of pull everybody back and reduce hours. And for some people, I couldn't afford them for a while. So they've been furloughed and taking unemployment. And now we're gradually starting to pull people back part-time. I'm hoping some, if not most of those will stay. And then it's just a question of, in a way, it's kind of very entrepreneurial again. It's almost like we
Right.
got to this point, we got knocked back down with easily 70% of our revenue stream gone. And now we're just rebuilding, and it's kind of fun. Again, it's kind of entrepreneurial. It's kind of got my juices going a little bit. And I have a good team behind me of people that are very committed to the magazine and its future and want to see it succeed. And so I'm very optimistic. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
I'm crazy, but I'm very optimistic.
Yeah.
I think that, I think there's a need for information that we're putting out there, and people sure seem to appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we all got knocked back a bit, but we're all going to get back up, right?
I think so too. I really feel very optimistic about that. I know you and I have talked, Jennifer, about this, but for all the horrible stuff in this pandemic, it's kind of forced some tweaks and things and changes that we maybe have been putting off or just didn't know how to do, and now we had to learn how to do it.
Right.
You and your Zoom, interviews. My goodness, now you're a broadcast journalist, Jennifer. On top of being an incredible lawyer, you're also a broadcast journalist.
I'm not sure I would go that far on the broadcast journalist.
But I mean, so there's some good stuff too.
Yeah.
It sort of forces a reckoning, I think, in a way, and that's good. It's good to shake things up once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of tragedy, but you gotta, some look for some positives in there, because there is just so much loss and sadness right now. And And I wanted to ask you, because I know you are a trained journalist, and your magazine, I've always really respected. It's very evidence-based in what you're writing about. Uh, and I love the resources, and I loved, here's what to do, but also, I mean, tackling some tough topics, right? Like one I read recently was about mental health and kids during the pandemic, right? And handling that. So I'm just curious how you guys approach that.
Well, I guess that is the newspaper journalist in me. I mean, it's very easy to drift just toward the light and fun topics, and of course we want that in there. But I see it also as a place to share ideas on some of the bigger things too that we all are concerned about. And so, for example, with the George Floyd murder and the race riots and all
Oh
of
yeah.
that, we did a story on raising anti-racist families, which now, of
Yeah.
course, that phrase is being overused, like all these other phrases people come up with. But just to be able to start opening that dialogue, we sat down as a team and decided that it was important to us that we start working harder to include diverse voices. And so we've been reaching out and soliciting some new writers and contributors, some of which I'm very excited about, from the Arizona Association for the Education of Young Children. We've got a lot of writers from all over the states that have started
Wow.
contributing to that. I'm proud to say that our issue that is out right now, the September issue, has a story about gender vocabulary, and is written
Mm,
by a trans man who is an early childhood educator, and
wow.
has written about using that language in an early education pronoun language, he, she, um, and there, and other pronouns
They
that
and them,
are
and yeah,
just
yeah,
more respectful of
yeah.
someone's actual true identity. And so some of the topics are not that. I mean, we ran a story once on raising a 7-year-old child who had already declared to be, a different gender than the birth
Wow.
would indicate. So those are tough topics, and we get criticized for them sometimes. But I think for the most part, we're just trying to put out some thoughtful things too, and just try to open up the dialogue, open up the just the way of thinking about other people in our community, so that we're all a little bit more sensitive, respectful, aware of the challenges that others are going through right now.
Well, and I really appreciate the inclusivity of the magazine. Like that my niece has Down syndrome,
Mhm.
Airly, and every year we've come to the special needs fair, which used to be in person and now will be virtual in its own way. Um, so you guys do a great job with that. What are you doing with the special needs fair? It's not a
Well,
fair, I
we
know.
were supposed to have our special needs resource fair a couple weeks ago. I think on August
Hmm.
22nd it was scheduled. And
Yeah.
of course we canceled it. So we have our the issue that we would have distributed that month. The September issue is always our special needs issue.
Hmm.
Um, so it has some resources in it for families that will be helpful. It has a story about helping get a child's learning differences identified, and the whole process that parents go through to do that. And there's some little things too, like free tutoring they have through Gigi's Playhouse for children with Down
Yes. Yeah.
syndrome, and just some kind of tips and strategies like that for families. And we're debating how to do this going forward with our events, because the camp fair, of course, is our huge signature event every February.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not thinking we're going to be able to have it by February either. Some of
Yeah.
my colleagues around the country have done virtual camp fairs where you do something similar to what you're doing right here. So we're looking at a lot of those options, and like everyone else, just kind of, what do we do with this now?
Yeah.
Figure
Right.
it
Right.
out.
Wow. Wow. Well, that is so interesting. Um, and the last thing I want to ask you about is I know that you recently edited a book.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Thanks for asking me because I'm
Yeah,
really proud of that.
yeah.
In a full circle story, I told you I got my journalism career started in Guam. And my editor out there at the time, he went on and did some other reporting around the Pacific Islands, but he's now based in Honolulu. And we kind of lost track of each other. But we reconnected a couple of years ago just through Facebook, surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that he was working on this project, and he used to work for one of the Hawaii state representatives. And so she had written her autobiography and he was helping her edit it. And I just thought it sounded really interesting. So I said, well, hey, if you need another set of eyeballs on it, I'd be happy to take a look at it. And he sent it to me while Dan and I were out of the country actually vacationing while one could do that. And
Right.
I read
Back
it
in
and
the
I thought,
day.
yeah, I thought it was just a delightful story, but I also had this kind of thing in me going, oh, I just would like to get my hands on that and work with it and kind of add some
Yeah.
details here and there. And so in November, I flew out to Honolulu. I met with former Representative Pat Saiki, and I spent an entire week in her home interviewing her and looking at
Jeez.
her clips and her photographs and hearing her beautiful, amazing stories.
Yeah.
And then I came home and spent the next several months incorporating what I learned from those interviews and all of that research into her original draft. And we just finished it. And had submitted it to one publisher that turned us down, but the second publisher has taken it. And so we expect it to
Nice.
be coming out, we hope, by the end of the year. So,
Wow.
yeah,
That's got to be such an interesting story. What a great opportunity to spend that
oh,
week with her.
it was a lot. It was an incredible experience. I will never forget it. And it's just, and now it's got me thinking, I like editing books. Maybe I'd like to do that again sometime.
Oh, yeah, you should take that on too.
Yeah, I think so.
Like you don't have anything else to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, this has been really, really fun. As always, talking to you and some future conversation. I want to hear more about that week because I'm just so interested. Oh, and what's the name of the book? I should have asked you that.
Oh, the book is called Pat Saiki, A Woman in the House, because of her years in the House of Representatives. First,
Okay.
first Japanese American woman Republican to serve in
Uh-huh.
the House of Representatives. So
Wow. I'm sure her story is absolutely fascinating. Well, this was really fun. It was always good to see you.
you too, Jennifer.
All
Thank
right.
you. I'd like to do the same with you sometime. Will you come talk to me at Raising Arizona Kids Facebook page? That would be great.
I will definitely do that and we'll have a fun conversation.
Okay, couple
All
weeks maybe.
right.
All right, we'll
Okay,
talk.
sounds good. Okay, bye.